Today's video is slightly different than anything I've done before. I guess you could call it a podcast. It's a comparison on the differences between refrigerators, freezers, air conditioners, and walk-in coolers approaching fast on Kung Fu Maintenance. Welcome back to Kung Fu Maintenance, where I show you how to make the most likely repairs you'll need to make in your lifetime. If you'd like to get the latest videos, subscribe and then hit the little bell icon right at the subscribe button, and it'll notify you of any new videos when they're released for you. Welcome back to Kung Fu Maintenance, doing a little bit different style video today, exploring the differences between refrigerators and air conditioners. Both systems use evaporator coils and condenser coils to absorb heat and then to give off heat. Both systems use a refrigerant to absorb heat and to give off heat. Both systems generally use fans to aid in the absorption and giving off of heat. Some of them don't need a fan when they're giving off heat, but generally these systems use some form of thermostat as a control to switch the units on and off to reach the desired temperatures. All of them condition space or remove heat from inside a unit or inside a box and then get rid of that heat outside of the box. Both of them cool to specified temperatures, generally controlled by the thermostat. The refrigerator has an evaporator in the freezer, which conditions that space to a lower temperature, obviously, than the refrigerator. And it uses door dampers and separate thermostats or temperature control switches to condition the different spaces to different temperatures. They're just different rooms, basically. The refrigerator and the freezer. Everything actually happens in the freezer compartment, but it is controlled how much heat is removed from inside the refrigerator compartment. Generally, freezers cool to around 0 degrees plus or minus 4 degrees, and some little variations in that. And refrigerators usually cool to around 40 degrees. Again, some different variations in that as science and particular thought looks at different best temperature practices to keep things at for food, prolonging food. I probably butchered that explanation, but all right. So what other there's a few differences. Air conditioners generally have an air filter that also conditions the air. Most refrigerators don't have an air filter. And then each system has usually some form of door switch, but the function is different. For a refrigerator, opening the door just opens or lets the light turn on. It's a light switch. For air conditioners, it's generally a service door switch that protects the safety of the service tech when they're going to work on a system. A lot of times you'll find some of those service doors bypassed. So generally things need to be unplugged or disconnected or breakers turned off in order to service equipment, which is generally the case anyway, but the door switch is a safety switch that turns things off if the service door is removed. Both systems use fans. Both systems have condensate pans. Moisture contains a lot of heat. We all know there's moisture in the air. Sometimes there's more humid days. That moisture affects how you feel temperature. And sometimes the air can feel thicker. If it's really humid, you feel the pressure around you. Well, as a air conditioner removes heat, the way it does is refrigerants have a much lower boiling point temperature than water generally, and when it boils off, it absorbs a lot of heat. So at the evaporator is where they generally use a metering device to change the state of the refrigerant. It's forced through a smaller opening where it's slowed down, and then the refrigerant boils off in the evaporator where it's released into a larger area, and the refrigerant boils off much quicker. Anyway, when that happens, just like a window where it's cold inside and hot outside and you get condensation on the window, you get condensation that runs down the evaporator into the condensate drain pan and down into the condensate drain line. With a refrigerator, that condensate drain line usually, often drains into a pan that either sits on top of the compressor or sits below the refrigerator. And sometimes there's fans or just the heat of the compressor aid to just evaporate the moisture that's there. With an air conditioner, generally they tend to put off more moisture because they're removing a lot more heat, and they're conditioning a much larger space, and so they generally either drain to a gravel well or straight to the outside somewhere through plumbing, or into some of them are hooked up like below bathroom sinks or below sinks and share the plumbing. Don't really like that setup, but that setup is out there. You will see that out there in the field if you service a lot of different equipment. Kind of interesting is water. Most people know water freezes at 32 degrees, and a freezer or a walk-in cooler or something gets colder than 32 degrees, right? It gets to 0 degrees. How does it do this and not just form a ton of ice? Well, they do form ice, but they use both systems use defrost cycles in order to melt that ice or to keep the evaporator clear from ice, so that the system can continue to cool properly. If you get too much ice or you don't have enough airflow and then you get buildup of ice, then things aren't going to work. Years ago, you had to manually defrost the freezers once in a while. Now we've done that, or things have been engineered to use a defrost timer and a defrost cycle to keep that ice melted and to create what's called the frost-free refrigerator. Walk-in coolers use defrost timers that run through cycles to make sure that ice doesn't form on the evaporator coil and doesn't create airflow blockage and keeps things cold. These are some of the differences between air conditioners and refrigerators. Just a different style video exploring the topic. I hope you liked it. If you do, please give it a like and share a nice comment in the comment section. It lets me know that you like this type of videos. If you didn't like it, go ahead and hit the dislike button. Lets me know that that people don't like this format. At least I can get some honest feedback. Thanks for watching Kung Fu Maintenance. I do hope you liked it though. Thanks for watching. Here is a second take on the same subject. Today's video will be discussing the differences between refrigerators and air conditioners. Differences and similarities. So both systems use an evaporator coil and a condenser coil generally to remove heat from the box or from the unit. Okay, so for air conditioners, it's conditioned space inside an apartment, inside house, hotel, hospital, whatever. And also you have like walk-in freezers and stuff like this. They all condition space. They all work by removing heat from inside the unit. How do they do that? Well, they do that using refrigerant, which boils off at a certain temperature and condenses at a certain temperature. And by cycling it through a system, we can absorb a lot of heat and get rid of it outside the box. At the evaporator coil, a lot of heat is absorbed into the refrigerant, and that is moved outside, and then using fans, that heat is blown off or is given off. With a air conditioner, it's generally given off outside. With a refrigerator, it's generally given off into the dwelling space. Refrigerators are designed to keep food to cool to certain temperatures in different compartments, and they do that via thermostats. Both systems use thermostats, air conditioners and refrigerators. Both systems have a door switch, but the function of the door switch is quite different in a refrigerator. It generally only controls the light. For an air conditioner, it's usually a service door switch that shuts the whole system off if the door is removed as a safety mechanism, if a service tech's going to work on the system. Although a lot of service door switches wind up getting bypassed because sometimes they have problems, and they often wind up getting bypassed. At least that's what I've seen a lot in the field. Both of them use fans. Both of them have condensate pans and condensate drains, and these sometimes get clogged on both systems. Generally, with a refrigerator, the water from the freezer, moisture contains a lot of heat, or holds a lot of heat, and moisture in the air contains a lot of heat. And when an air conditioner system is absorbing that heat, a lot of times it gives off its moisture, kind of like you see on a window when it's cold outside and warm inside. Moisture condenses on the window. Well, there's a change of states as things are going on in those two circumstances, or in that circumstance. At the refrigerator, water is given off at the evaporator, and it drains through a condensate drain in the freezer at the evaporator, below the evaporator, and then usually runs to the condensate pan, like a pan that sits on top of the compressor, or a pan that sits below the compressor. The heat of the compressor and the fans cycling often act to evaporate that moisture that's given off. With an air conditioner, it often goes to a condensate drain, a condensate pan, and then a condensate drain, and it's usually drained to outside. Some are drained into a sink, are plumbed in and draining under sinks, or some of them to gravel wells outside. It just depends. Both systems use a condenser coil. That's where heat is given off outside, or outside the box, or outside the unit. And usually a fan is blown across that. Not in all systems, but in most systems, or many systems, a fan is used to hasten the give off of heat. Both of them use a compressor. Both air conditioners and refrigerators use a compressor to pump the refrigerant. It's kind of like the heart of the system. One difference between air conditioners and refrigerators is many air conditioners use an air filter. Most refrigerators don't have an air filter. And for conditioned spaces, for air conditioners, it's a nice feature to be able to clean the air. It's like a secondary benefit function of the air conditioner. Then you have like walk-in freezers. How do they get so cold? If water freezes at 32 degrees, often the coil is kept at about 40 degrees, but because you have a differential incoming air and then outgoing air, usually about 20 degrees is absorbed at the coil, and so the conditioned air is somewhat cooler than the heat that was removed when it was going in. And because refrigerant has a lower freezing point, it can continue to remove heat. But because water freezes at 32 degrees, systems need a defrost cycle and a defrost coil, or a defrost system, in order to melt ice and keep ice from building up, because these systems get so cold. So they often use defrost timers or sensors to make sure that you don't have too much ice buildup. Years ago you had to manually defrost a freezer because it would build up too much ice, and now things are engineered to self-defrost using timers and using sensors. This has just been a little exploration with the infograph, so you can kind of get a visual idea of the differences between air conditioners and refrigerators, freezers, etc. Hope you find this helpful and interesting. If you do, let me know, give it a like, and I'll try to make more videos in this kind of format. And if not, dislike it, so I know that you don't like this format, but I might still do things like this once in a while anyway, but at least I'll have good feedback on whether this is well received or not. A quick search in my YouTube channel, you should be able to find a bunch of material that'll be helpful to your maintenance needs. Also, links to the tools and parts used in the videos are in the description below.